Hello everyone, this is the Vintage Sewing Machine Garage, making a video today on one of my favorite 1960s sewing machines. You are looking at the Kenmore 158.904, and it is part of a family of machines that was sold at Sears stores in the early 1960s. And it is one of the heaviest 1960s Japanese-made machines I have ever come across. And if you pick one up, you will know this. It is a beast in all senses of the word. Very powerful in its sewing capacity. It has the 1.2 amp Kenmore sewing motors. That's one of the class of motors from that era that I'm particularly fond of. And this machine was offered in, of course, multiple variations. When you went into a Sears store back in the early 60s, it was quite something. And the sewing department would have been very large because it was very profitable for Sears. Sewing machines, even in this period, are still very expensive items for people to purchase. And so they would often establish credit. And remember, these are the days before large-scale use of credit cards. And so very often, when you needed to make payments on something, you would get credit at wherever the item was being sold. And Sears built its empire in part on financing people's ability to purchase items. And this would have been an example. And of course, when you went into Sears, you got all sorts of choices. You would have basic straight stitch machines, and then some that added zigzag, some that added automatic zigzag, meaning it was built into the machine. And then when you got up into the 904, there's also a 905, and there may even be a 906, I'm not quite sure. You got more features. And of course, in these days, when you paid more, the quality was the same at the entry-level machines, but they just didn't have the same number of features. If you wanted those features, you would pay extra. Now, this model design came in a couple of color schemes. What you're seeing here is sort of a vanilla cream color with a lavender inlay here, and then there's also a lavender on the side. I'll be coming around in a minute with the camera and try to remember to give you a little view of that. And this machine would have also come in a color scheme with a similar cream color, but then the inlay would have been this sort of gold, yellowy olive color, which was also popular in the 60s. And the particular person who would have bought this machine paid extra for accessories, or maybe, who knows, maybe the sales department at Sears enticed them. Maybe they were having some kind of special, I don't know. In any case, you could get matching boxes of accessories, and this machine came with a lot. The first thing I will show you is the buttonhole attachment. Many of you have heard me talk about buttonhole making and how I really like accessory attachments like this as compared to built-in buttonhole features. I'm not very impressed with those. I'm not impressed with how they work, and I'm certainly not impressed with them when they break, because they are a royal pain. This buttonhole attachment has its basic instructions very conveniently put into the lid of the box, so maybe you are less likely to lose something like that. Of course, it's metal, just like the machine. This particular buttonholer works with Kenmore machines from about a 5-year span, and I'm going to be making a video on another Kenmore that's from around the same era, maybe a few years later, in a sort of pistachio cream color. It is also an amazing machine, and it uses cams, but they're a different cam color. Now, one thing to mention here, many of your Kenmores from this era on into the 70s, when you got the buttonhole attachment, you got a special plate. You would take the bobbin plate that's on the machine underneath this fabric, you would remove that, and you would put this one in place. And there is a gear here that drives it, and it works off of a gear underneath the machine. And of course, it has this gear right here. The bottom line here is that this makes for a very strong buttonhole attachment device. Okay, so you can do buttonholes even on thick fabrics if your heart desires. So this is just the weight of this tells you this was a substantial piece of equipment, just like the machine. And of course, it has different size buttonhole templates. Some of you may or may not make buttonholes, but if you do, this one is very good at that. Now, this machine, in addition to having a number of features, also has the capacity to make decorative stitches. Some manufacturers used to call these decorative stitches or designer stitches, even embroidery stitches. Even though it's not technically embroidery, it certainly mimics the look of embroidery. Included with this machine is another box, two-tone box. You have a Kenmore needle threader. For those of you who have only used modern plastic machines, there are devices to help you thread needles on vintage machines, and you don't have to have a new computerized machine to make decorative stitches. You can do it with cams. Now, cams work not unlike, they're kind of like a little music box. They have a guide that helps them form a particular stitch, and I'm going to show you how this works on this machine. And it actually comes with 6, 12, 14, 15. It comes with 30 cams. Okay, here's the first set. And this goes through, I think, 15, and you have all of these different designs. And then underneath, the second row, one of these is in the machine right now, but it's included. You have, once you get from 21 through 30, the stitches become more complex, and even the height of the disc changes. And these are the extra fancy ones because the machine, in order to make some of these, or if not all of these, has to move backwards a little bit. And this is the beginning of the introduction of what would become things like stretch stitches and reverse type stitches. That is a mechanical dance a machine has to do that's more complicated than your good old straight stitch machine, but it does it beautifully. And I've got one of these in here right now, and I'm going to be demonstrating that for you all. And in the lid of this big box, here of course is that first tray of cams I showed you. There is yet another guide, and it shows you the disc number, it's got the pattern, and then it even gives you an indication of how to set the stitch length. So all of the information you need for how to do this. It's not very complex, and I don't know how many of these were actually used. This was a selling point. Look at all the different things you could do. Most people need straight, zigzag, and blind stitch. I mean, that's most of what people use with sewing, but here it is, and they are beautifully made. Notice this says model 90. This would have been 158 tells you it was made by Marusan, which is one of the best manufacturers for Sears in this period. And the 90 series would have included the 90 or 904, 905. And again, why did they have so many models? The goal behind all of this was to, there's the front of that box case. The goal of this, of all of this sort of complexity, it was designed to get people to buy a new sewing machine because the old ones didn't wear out. So if you wanted to sell machines, you had to offer more features. Now I want to highlight a few things for you all with this machine. By this period, you'll notice you're seeing lots of more knobs and controls because you have, again, more features, more complexity, but all of this is mechanical. There is, again, no software driving this. Just to kind of go over this with you, this button here controls your stitch length. It's currently set just below 1, I think 1 3/4 for the stitch that I'm working on. Down here is your reverse, so you would hold this button if you need to back tack. Up here, you have needle position. You have left, center, right, and something called AR, which means automatic reverse. And that is a position for the needle that is needed with some of the decorative stitch cams. Now, here you have a control for stitch width. It's set on 0, which means it's set up for straight stitch or the decorative stitches, but it can go all the way to what they call 4, which is the widest zigzag. And then here you have an adjustment for the length of decorative stitches. 1 is the norm. There is an arrow, which is a halfway point, and that also has another function I'll show in a minute. And then number 2 allows you to stretch out the length of your decorative stitches, giving you an entirely different look, right? Now, I have mentioned to you all before, when you are restoring sewing machines, if you've got a machine you are not familiar with, I have restored one of these in this same color scheme before, and so I knew this going in. Like many machines, this machine had sat for a while, and almost all of the knobs were stiff. Many of them did not move. Of course, I took my own advice and I did not force them. I went behind the machine, of course, took the lid off, and began to clean and lubricate the linkages, as I've showed some of you on other machines, such as the old Kenmore free arm that I'm still working on. And then, of course, slowly but surely got these knobs to move, and now they move beautifully, as they were meant to, and no harm came to the knob. But there's one other thing to note. Sometimes you will find this on some of the Singer 400 and 500 series. You will also see it on this machine and quite a few others. It is not intuitive when you look at a dial how you are supposed to adjust that dial. For example, this dial turns right or left. This dial turns right. This dial turns right. This dial turns to the right or left, but not until you have to depress it. You have to push it in, because when it comes out, it is locked. That helps you lock in your stitch width. So I'll show you. If I try to turn this, it doesn't turn. Anyone who tries to force this will damage the knob. Fortunately, I knew better. You push in and then you turn. Well, actually, I have a cam in here now. I just overrode myself. Here we go. So watch, I'm going to push in, right? And notice I can push here, and if I let the knob come back out, it locks in at number 2. Let's zoom in so you guys can see this. Oops. Okay, so I'm going to push in again, and I'm going to come all the way to 4. And if I don't let it come out, it's spring-loaded, so it'll come all the way back to 0. But if I push in, come all the way to 4, and then let it pop out, it locks in. And that is how that knob control works. But again, if you don't know that, and you start, again, you need to know how the knobs and controls work. If you're not sure, other than a video like this, you can get the manual. The manual will give you really detailed instruction on how to operate the knobs. So that's always good to know. I believe on the Singer 4 and 500 series, you actually have some knobs you push in to turn, and some you have to pull to turn. And you just have to know and make sure you know before you start going to town, moving knobs and things around, because you can damage them, and unnecessarily. It's not going to be the machine or the knob's fault. It will be the user error. So one other thing to share with you about this machine that I think is kind of fun. I have mentioned to you all before that Kenmore sewing machines would often, some of the Japanese manufacturers would copy the patents of other manufacturers after they had expired. The Bernina company in Switzerland had several things that were distinctive about their machines. One of them was that they had special feet. This machine does not have this, but some of the 1970s Kenmores do. They have what's called a super high shank foot, and it only takes those feet, and they were only sold at Sears. And Sears was copying Bernina, because any of you who have Berninas know that Berninas use Bernina feet, and they don't use anyone else's feet. And I'm talking about vintage machines. Another thing that happened, though, is that someone, either at Marusan, who was making this machine for Sears, or someone at Sears, noticed that a machine in the late 50s by Necchi called the Supernova, or the BU Supernova, that machine had a very clever Italian design where the bobbin winder was hidden. And of course, it's hidden by a little door. When you lift up that door, the Necchi bobbin winding device would sort of raise up, and you would use it. And then, of course, you would close it behind the door to hide it. I don't know, it was a design thing. Very beautiful, more complexity than maybe was needed. The Kenmore is a little simpler, but it has the same aesthetic. Behind here is a bobbin winder, which I've serviced, of course, like the rest of the machine, and it works just like many of the Japanese clone bobbin winders. But on this model, it is hidden behind the door so that you don't have to look at your bobbin winder. So this is, this is one of the extra things they were trying to use to impress potential consumers. Let's see, this machine will provide double needle sewing if you so desire. What else to say about it? You can lower your feed dogs. There's a feed dog drop. There is, of course, the bobbin winder. And you have a control dial up here on top for your presser bar pressure level. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do some sewing, just a little demonstration here for you all. And I've got light colored thread and light colored fabric, and I was searching. I finally found a piece of fabric a little darker, and I'm going to swap it out because I want you all to see these decorative stitches and how nice they turn out. But in any case, this is a beast of a machine. And again, this would have been one of the more expensive and fancier Kenmores because it had all of these optional features that you could get in 1962-63. So I'm going to go ahead and run it and do a little bit more decorative stitching. And as promised, I told you guys I would show you the side. And the side here is lavender, and it has a K. I don't know if you can make that out in this light. Now I'm going to we're going to aim downward toward the material. And what I have right now is in one of the more complex cams that is set up for sewing. And if you look closely, watch the fabric under the foot, and you're going to see it feed, as it obviously should, toward the back, but it's also going to make some intermittent moves forward, and that allows it to make the pattern that it's going to do. And of course, all of this needle movement is being directed by the cam. There is no computer software, there is no program telling it to do this. It is all mechanical. And that's a good thing. If there was software from 1963 in sewing machines, which of course they didn't have, but if they had, it would be near impossible to rescue. You see I can slow the needle down. I can speed it up. Now I'm going to pull this out for a moment. This is a piece of linen. Let's see here. And I'm going to see if this will show up. This is why I'm going to trade out the fabric color. Well, let's see if any of this will come through. May not. This is something I can see, and I was using this to test. I always want to test the machines that I overhaul and make sure that they're ready to go into service. Now, the one on the left is sort of it's kind of like a scallop pattern, and you can see it going wide and then narrow, wide and then narrow. Then the next one, the more complex one, is sort of like a Greek key. And if you look at it moving across here, again, that doesn't show up very well. That's why I'm switching this out for you all. I have sort of a light green thread, still not a good contrast, but I'm going to now put in, I have more of a khaki colored fabric here, little scrap that I'm going to use, and let's see if that doesn't improve things. One of the things I should mention is that by the time you get to the 1960s, Kenmore machines and others begin to offer feed dogs that have a greater width. They typically have more friction capacity, and you'll notice that heavier material will feed a little bit better. And even by this early period, at least with the Kenmores, they are designing their machines to have front to back needle threading. Now, this is a medium weight cotton from an old pair of khakis. Let's see what this looks like on a darker background. Let's see here. We've got that. Okay, everyone, just needed to reset my thread. And now if you watch the needle area, again, you'll notice that the fabric moves forward and then backwards again as it feeds back. And it is creating one of the decorative patterns. I'm going to stop and pull this out because I want all of you to see what it does, what it's capable of. And again, this would have been, let's see, I have a top thread. There we go. See if you guys can see this. A little bit better contrast. It's, again, I wish I had an even darker fabric, just don't have any at the moment. I usually do. And then on the back side, you'll see the blue bobbin thread. And again, this is something that, you know, some people might have used on baby clothes. You may have projects that you would like to use something like this on. I suspect that a lot of people, just like with today's modern machines, I don't know that all of you who have new machines use all 600 of your decorative stitches. I don't know that you do, but in any case, okay, let's see. Let's take a look. I'm going to swap out and do one more disc for you guys, and let's see. Maybe I'll do the. Maybe I will do the scallop pattern that I was trying to show on the other machine. We'll see how that turns out. Okay, so I'm going to move the camera and let you see how I set the discs on this machine. It's not hard, but again, there is a method like with any other. And let's see, let's move the camera. Okay, so I reach over here to this hatch. Some of you have other machines from this year that have this feature. And you'll notice that when you pull the hatch up, it actually moves the little lever follower for the gear out of the way so you can remove it. So I'll take this out. You can see this is this was cam number 22, has this little Greek key. That's what it says that it's supposed to look like. So we'll take that out. And looking at our little scallop pattern here. Now this is 1 through 20. And any of those cams, you set them a little differently. So let's go inside here. You'll see this drive shaft. That's what the cam fits on. The little white divot, sort of like a domino divot there, it needs to line up with the apex of this. Let's zoom in. You want it to line up with this. This is the little arm that follows that helps create the pattern. And if you put the divot lined up with that, then you will be able to start the pattern from the beginning and not begin mid-pattern. The other thing to note is that there is a little extension here, a little metal piece, and you want one of these little small holes on the back of the disc to go in there. So if you put your disc in like that, and you've only got about 1/8 of an inch showing on the drive shaft, you haven't loaded the cam, and if you try to use it, it's not going to work. So you're going to want to find that little nub, if you will. And by the way, if you don't hold your hatch all the way back, this piece will put pressure and cause resistance. So make sure you have it back. Now I can come in here like so. Now I'm going to find a spot. Boom, and I just felt it go click. Now, if for some reason this piece has moved and you can't get that white dot to line up very well with, let's see if you guys can see it on the other side here. You'll see where the white dot is lined up here. If you can't, the instruction manual will show you there's a way to change one of the dial settings, and then you can move it freely before locking it back in place. So there is a way to do that, so I wouldn't worry about it. But this one loaded just fine. Let's put this back in. Now, we'll change positions again. Okay, so you might be thinking, okay, what do we have to change? Well, The first set of discs have a certain setting, and then the later set, like the one I just showed you that are fancier stitch patterns, they have the setting that we just have right now, which is AR, or automatic reverse, because remember those fancier stitches, they move back and forth, they require a different setting. So we go back to our handy dandy guide here, and I am using number 4. And since I'm going to use number 4, I look for it here. Here's the pattern, and then it will tell me what my setting should be, right? So it looks like it's going to ask me to have 1.5 in terms of the length of the stitch. So I'll come over here to my stitch length, make sure I have 1.5. And it wants me to use needle position L. So instead of the AR, I'm going to move this to L, which is left. That means left needle position. Make sure your needle is up out of the fabric when you do this. Let's see, stitch width 0, and there you go. Those are the 3 settings we had to make here to get ready for this cam. So let's see how it does. Be helpful if we aim down toward where the material is. There we go. Let's see here. I'm going to demonstrate this scallop for you using the 1.5 inch length that the guide suggested, but of course when you change your length, you get a different appearance, and that's how you can really get lots of different stitch designs when using basically the same cam. You just change the length of the stitch. Now I'm going to go over here and I will adjust the length back down to like just maybe 2/3. And let's see, we'll see what kind of different appearance we get with it. I'm just slowing down the needle so you can see that you can slow it down. You do have good needle control. And maybe shorten it even more. Oops, a little too short there. Okay, let's take a look and see what our design looks like here. Not all the machines I show or restore have these features, and so I don't often get to show how these things work. So the first row of scallops is by my thumb here on the bottom, and it makes a very nice consistent pattern, but you'll see that of course it's a longer stitch length, and the one above it was shortened. So you can get lots of different variations on these stitches, and they work really well. We'll look on the back here and you'll see the reverse. There's sort of a blue, sort of a bluish gray colored thread. And again, you know, the more contrast and the brighter the thread you use, the more effects you can get. But I just wanted to show that to you all. Now I'm going to take out the disc and just show you what I believe the majority of you will use this machine for, which was just good old-fashioned stitching. And this machine can definitely do it. It is very powerful, one of the stronger of those, along with the 1752 model that you will see coming up. So we're going to remove this cam. And let's see, we're going to go back to center for needle position. And I'm going to come all the way to the longest stitch length. And I'll come back with the same fabric here so you can see, and we'll just start with a straight lock stitch, which is still the majority of what most people who sew use. Sorry guys, didn't have my thread in properly. Let's do a little back tacking for you. Show you that you can easily back tack. I'm going to come back and I'm going to make a much shorter stitch. We'll shorten the stitch length so you can see that. Actually, no, let's leave the stitch length because I want to come over and change the width and make for you a zigzag. Today, we expect zigzag in a lot of modern machines. When it first came out in the 50s, by the 60s, it was considered a very useful feature, but of course, people still did not have overlock machines that were domestic, right? They didn't have home sergers. They hadn't been released, they hadn't been put on the market at that time. So, overcast or zigzag stitching was a big deal. Let's see. Okay, so we're going to make sure our needle is up. And let's come over to the stitch width. I'm going to, again, push in, come all the way over, leave it at 4 so we can get a nice wide zigzag. And we'll have a long one so we can see what that looks like. And then I'm going to then shorten it. We'll see what that looks like. Pull this up for you all. Now let's take a look. We've got a really nice solid straight stitch you'll see here, and this is the long version right here by my thumb. And then came up top and did a zigzag. That's a wide and long zigzag, and then I shortened it just to show you another variation on the zigzag stitch. But there you go, guys. That is the Kenmore 90 series. This one is the 904, and it is a tour de force. This would have been, I don't know if it was the most premium, but it was one of the most expensive Kenmore machines available in the early 1960s. This machine comes with its own carrying case in a nice two-toned metallic lavender carrying case, which is really snazzy looking. And of course it includes the all of the cams and the buttonhole features. I have the zigzag foot. I may have a zipper foot, but I know I have a straight stitch foot, and this is for those of you who might sew delicate fabrics. So again, this machine is ready to go. It has had a full servicing, and there are many of my clients prefer just a plain old straight stitch machine. They're sewing heavy stuff, but some of you like not only to have zigzag, but being able, maybe you want to do bar tacking. You're sewing, sometimes you're sewing nylon backpacks or bike packs. And others of you may actually want to use the decorative stitches. So again, if anyone tells you you've got to have a new modern plastic machine to do decorative stitches, that's not true. This is the period in sewing machine history when decorative stitches become a thing. And a lot of people were sold machines based on the interest in doing this. How much of it they actually did is probably not unlike what many of you who have new machines do. You may occasionally use decorative stitches, but it's certainly nice to have them, and this machine does them all with no computer whatsoever, except for the computer between your ears. As I mentioned, you all are the brains and the machine is the brawn, and this machine definitely is the brawn. Made in Japan, early 1960s, one of Sears' finest, in my own opinion, having looked at and restored many Kenmores in my time. Great machine, very, very strong. If you have an interest, contact me through the listing, and you can bring fabrics to sew on, or I can provide some fabrics here that you can try out. I have a brand new Schmetz size 16 jeans needle in this machine, but of course it will take up to a size 18. And if you have your own needle preference, you can certainly use that. Thank you for watching, everyone, and stay tuned for the next Kenmore video, which is for a 1966 model. Has similar features but a different look, and we will see you next time.